Once upon a time, there was a family. The family had a mom who was 50 years old, a daughter who was 30, a son who was 23, another son who was 24, and Chris, their stepfather, who was 45. Chris worked with a lady named Betsy, who was 25, and knew another lady named Darla, who was about 40. The 24-year-old son had moved back to live with his mom after she and his dad got a divorce. They had been married for a long time, 25 years. But after the divorce, Mom met Chris. Mom worked in a place called the county jail. Chris had some trouble in the past because he drove a car when he shouldn't have. The son didn't talk much about these things because he knew his mom was sad about her marriage ending. But Chris seemed to make her happy, so he thought it was okay. The son, his brother, and his sister all went to live with Mom and Chris. They all got along well. Chris and the son even liked the same video games. Everything was fine until the year 2017. Chris had to go to court a lot because of his past. But one day, he didn't come back home. Everyone was worried. Then they got a call from him. He was in Texas, and the FBI had caught him. He was in trouble because he was in a car during a bad deal. It was something to do with his family's problems in Texas. Chris decided to help the police so he wouldn't get in too much trouble. Mom was very upset. She talked to Chris a lot over the year. They even planned to get married when he came back. Chris's boss at his work, DQ, said he could be the manager again when he returned. But Chris had a big problem with drinking too much alcohol. He started to drink more and more. He would drink a lot of beer every day. When Chris drank, he wasn't very nice. He would argue, but he wasn't violent. Mom put up with this for many years. She thought he was just stressed from work and the court stuff. After a long time, Mom couldn't handle it anymore. One night, Chris came home and he was very drunk. Mom asked him if he had been drinking. He said yes. So she told him he had to leave. He went to stay with a friend. The next day, Mom asked her kids to pack some of Chris's things so he wouldn't have to come back until he was not drinking. While they were packing his things, someone knocked on the front door. It was Betsy, a coworker of Chris. The son knew her from high school. Betsy told Mom that she had something very important to tell her. After Betty had asked my mother to keep the source of her information a secret, she told her a surprising story. Betty revealed that Chris, our stepfather, was having a secret relationship with another woman named Darla. Chris had been meeting Darla at his workplace for secret meetups. Betty had found out about this, and Chris had threatened to fire her if she ever told my mother. Betty also shared that Darla was pregnant with Chris's baby. This news made my mother very angry. We were all shocked by what Betty told us. My mother, filled with anger, told us to gather all of Chris's things. We collected everything he owned from our house and threw it away in the alley behind our house. Our house was rented, and only my mother's name was on the lease. This meant Chris couldn't come back to the house. Then my mother called Chris to talk about what Betty had said. Chris admitted to everything. He said he was happy that Darla was pregnant. He wanted a child of his own because his mother didn't want more children. She thought having more than 3 children would be too hard on her body. Chris didn't say sorry for anything he had done. My mother arranged for Chris to pick up his things from the alley. A police officer was there to make sure everything went smoothly. After that, Chris left our lives. My mother wanted to forget about Chris and move on. She was very upset because of everything that had happened. She didn't want anything more to do with him. But my sister, my brother, and I felt differently. We had other ideas. The children in the family decided to take action after learning about Chris's behavior. They knew Chris worked at DQ, a place that makes ice cream and food. This DQ was part of a bigger group owned by a man who was also a friend of Chris. The children told the owner about the bad things Chris did at work. The owner didn't like this and decided to fire Chris. He also said Chris couldn't come to any of his DQ stores anymore. Funny enough, Betty, who had told their mom about Chris, got his old job. She was now in charge and did a great job. Without a job or a place to stay, Chris moved to another town about an hour away. He lived there with Darla, but the children found out Chris was working at another DQ in that town. So they told the owner of that DQ about Chris. Even though nothing bad was happening there, the process took a while. But in the end, Chris lost that job too. Soon after, Chris started driving around the neighborhood where the children and their mom lived. He seemed to be following them. This was probably because he was upset about losing his jobs. Chris wasn't supposed to drive because of past mistakes with driving. When he lived with the family, he didn't need to drive because his work was close, and they could drive him if needed. But now he was driving by himself, which he shouldn't have been doing. The children called the police. They told them about seeing Darla's car in their area and that they thought Chris was driving it without a proper license. They asked the police to stop the car if they saw it again. After a few weeks, the police did stop the car. They found Chris driving without a license and while he had been drinking, so they took him back to jail. After Chris was taken to jail for driving without a license and while drinking, the police decided to check the house where he was living with Darla. They found something very serious there, many guns. Chris, because he had been in trouble with the law before, was not allowed to have guns. This was a big problem for him, and meant he had to stay in jail even longer. When Chris finished his time in jail for the driving issues, it was time for him to go back to jail in Texas. There was a legal case waiting for him there. While Chris was in jail, Darla had their baby. Darla realized that Chris was not a good person. She decided she didn't want anything to do with him anymore and stopped talking to him. During his time in jail, Chris wrote many letters to the children's mother. He said he was sorry, asked her to take him back, and also said it wasn't his fault. He wrote all of these things in the same letters. The mother didn't want these letters. She burned them all. After all this, the family moved to another state. They wanted to start a new life. The children heard that Chris got out of jail a few years later. Now he lives in Kansas. He's having a hard time and is dealing with a legal case about child support that Darla started. The children's mom has a new person in her life now. He is kind and cares for her much more than Chris ever did. The brother and sister have moved out, but the son still lives with his mom. He helps her fix up the new house they bought. Everything seems to be going well for them now. The son remembered all this when he was talking with a coworker about people who cheat. He thought it would be interesting to share this story so others could read it and maybe learn something from it. Here is the next story of a former manager who made storytellers' life hell, and he finally got her fired. Once upon a time, in a quiet little town, there was a woman who was in need of a new job. She and her husband had both lost their jobs due to some unlucky circumstances, and this made life at home quite challenging. Despite this, she remained hopeful and began searching for a new opportunity to work. One day, she found a job that was different from what she was used to doing. The job was at a big company, and she was excited to meet new people and learn new things. Her new boss, Gary, seemed very kind and friendly. He welcomed her with a warm smile and introduced her to her new colleagues. She felt happy and hopeful that this was the start of a good chapter in her life. However, Gary, her new boss, was extremely busy with lots of important tasks. Because he had so much to do, he asked another manager named Jane to help the woman settle in and learn about her new role. Jane was in charge of a team, and the woman was supposed to help connect her team with Jane's team, ensuring everyone worked well together. At first, things seemed okay, but soon the woman noticed that Jane liked to control everything. Jane started asking the woman to work during her lunch breaks, change her holiday plans at the last minute, and even called her late at night to discuss work. Jane's way of speaking on the phone was stern and bossy, which made the woman feel uncomfortable. Jane also started saying unkind things that were not related to work. She made comments about the woman's weight, which were unfair and hurtful. These comments made the woman feel sad and upset, but she tried to stay strong and not let Jane's words bother her. Despite the challenges, the woman continued to work at the job because she and her husband needed the money to pay for their home and other important things. But as days turned into weeks, the situation with Jane didn't get better. It actually got worse. One day, after a particularly hard week where the woman was dealing with a sad event in her family, Jane yelled at her over a small mistake at work. This was the moment when the woman realized she couldn't tolerate Jane's unkind behavior anymore. She felt overwhelmed and decided it was time to talk to Gary about everything that was happening. Gary listened to the woman with a sympathetic ear. He wasn't surprised to hear about Jane's behavior. In fact, he shared that many people on Jane's team had already quit because of similar experiences. Gary wanted to help, so he offered the woman a chance to move to a different team, where she wouldn't have to work with Jane directly. The woman felt relieved and hopeful again, thinking that this change would make things better. The woman moved to her new team and started working under Gary's direct supervision. She felt happier and more at ease in her new role. However, Jane didn't seem to want to let go. Even though the woman was now in a different team, Jane continued to send her bossy emails and tried to tell her what to do from a distance. One day, Jane came to the woman's desk and spoke loudly in front of everyone, saying that the woman was not qualified for her job. Gary overheard this and stood up for the woman, telling Jane that her behavior was unacceptable. Despite Gary's support, Jane's verbal attacks did not stop. After enduring 2 more months of Jane's ongoing unkind behavior, the woman made a difficult decision. She decided that she could no longer work in a place where she was treated so unfairly. She wrote a resignation letter, explaining why she was leaving, and included a list of all the unkind things Jane had said to her. She shared this letter with everyone at work, including Gary and other managers. Gary tried his best to convince the woman to stay, offering to make changes that would make her feel more comfortable at work. However, the woman knew that the only way she would stay was if Jane was no longer there, and Gary did not have the power to make that happen. Jane's boss was in a different country, and despite several complaints from many people about Jane, nothing had been done to address the situation. So, with a heavy heart but a sense of pride for standing up for herself, the woman left her job. She told everyone exactly why she was leaving and did so without feeling ashamed. She knew it was important to speak up against unfair treatment and to look for a better, kinder work environment. After leaving the job, the woman and her husband faced some very tough times. They had very little money and sometimes could only afford to eat slices of bread for dinner. They had to pay for their house and other urgent expenses, including costs related to a health crisis and a funeral. Even though her husband found a new job, they were still struggling to catch up on all their bills. The woman didn't give up. She spent her days applying to many different jobs, sometimes as many as 20 in a single day. She was determined to find a new job where she would be treated kindly and with respect. Then one month, something unexpected happened. The woman saw a public announcement about a very important person, known as a big shot, joining the company she had just left. She knew this person well because she had worked with him closely at a different company. She sent him a congratulatory message, offering to provide insights about his new workplace. The big shot replied, and they had a quick phone call where the woman shared her thoughts and ideas about the company and where it could improve. After their conversation, the big shot was impressed with the woman's knowledge and experience. He asked her to join his team at the company as his chief of staff. The woman was thrilled and accepted the offer immediately. The day came for the first big meeting with all the company's important leaders, including the VPs and other high-ranking officials. They all gathered in a large conference room to welcome the big shot to the company. During his speech, the big shot casually mentioned that the woman would be his chief of staff. This announcement came as a big surprise to everyone, especially Jane. Jane was shocked to hear that the woman she had treated so unkindly was now in a higher position than her. What Jane didn't know was that the woman had lots of experience and had previously worked in a high-level position at another company. The woman had also worked with the big shot for many years, and he trusted her abilities and judgment. Unfortunately, Jane's reaction to this news was not positive. She sent an email to the big shot, saying untruthful and mean things about the woman. She claimed that the woman was unqualified, that she had tried to get Jane fired, and that she might have lied to get ahead in her career. Jane didn't even try to hide her dislike for the woman. The big shot forwarded Jane's email to the woman, asking her to explain what was happening. The woman was both nervous and excited. She knew this was her chance to share her side of the story and to stand up for herself once again. The woman had an hour-long call with the big shot. She explained how Jane's behavior was harmful to the company's culture and how Jane was generally an unkind person. She provided evidence to support her claims. Gary confirmed that the entire team that worked under Jane had quit because of her behavior. The woman also showed the big shot her previous resignation letter, which detailed the reasons why she had left the company. Additionally, she shared some of the mean emails Jane had sent to her staff, which they were willing to share. After hearing everything and reviewing the evidence, the big shot made a decision. He decided that Jane's behavior was unacceptable and that it was best for the company if she no longer worked there. Jane was fired on a Friday. The woman felt a sense of relief and vindication. She had stood up for what was right and had been recognized for her abilities and her commitment to creating a positive work environment. She was now in a position where she could make a real difference in the company, working with people who respected and valued her. In the end, the woman's journey taught her important lessons. She learned that it's crucial to stand up for oneself, to seek out environments where kindness and respect are valued, and to never give up hope, even in difficult times. Her story is a reminder that change can be good, and sometimes, being brave and speaking up can lead to better opportunities and happier times. And so, the woman's story shows us that even when things seem tough, there's always a chance for a new beginning and for things to get better. It's important to believe in oneself, to be kind, and to always look for the light at the end of the tunnel.